All right. Thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate you all joining us for this presentation. Today's topic is one that I've had several faculty ask about over the years. I'm excited today to get to partner with eLearning for this presentation. In case you aren't aware, I'm pleased to inform you that we have some old new faces over in eLearning, if that makes sense. So I'm specifically talking about Dr. Dara Anderson and Annie Fuchs, as well as Carrie Taylor. So I will give them just a minute here to introduce themselves to you.
All right, I decided I'd turn my video on for this part. Like Jana said, my name is Dara Anderson, and I have actually been in the eLearning Center since March of 20. I come from a faculty position with curriculum and instruction. And before that, some of you may know me, I worked in the chemistry department as the laboratory coordinator. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys today about the reporting functions and some of that stuff in Blackboard, and to let you all know that the eLearning Center is here, and if you need anything, to please reach out to us. So I'm going to pass it to Annie.
Sorry guys, I think like two of us were messing with the controls. Okay, there we go. Hi guys, I'm Annie. Some of you may recognize my name and not my face. I started as a student worker in the eLearning Center in January of 2019. And I left for a little bit in August of 21, and then I came back in December of 21 to start full-time. So I'm really excited to start collaborating with all the IDs and everyone outside of campus and get kind of full-time perspective on campus, and not so much the student worker perspective as well as the full-time, or as well as the student worker perspective. So I'm super excited about this opportunity. Thank you everyone for joining.
Great, thank you, Annie. All right, so I will just give us a brief presentation overview so you have an idea of what we're going to talk about today. After I introduce the topic for a few minutes, we're going to kind of shift gears and start getting into each of the areas of analytics. And so I have those listed here, basically numbers 2 through 5 here. And so we're going to be a little bit experimental today. So if you would like, we encourage you to open up one of your classes at that point in time, do that in another window, and try to follow along with each of these types of metrics that we're going to talk about. So we want to keep the presentation conversational, so that way, you know, if there's things that you can't find or you have issues accessing them, you know, you can post that in the chat, you can unmute, and we can kind of stop and talk about it if we need to. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead now and get us into the introduction pretty briefly here. So first thing I'm going to talk about is key performance indicators. So I know that probably sounds like a bunch of jargon, right, to get us going right off the bat. But this is a term that we use a lot in conversations about web analytics, and I don't know how often we really apply that to course content, but it's kind of the exact same principles. So with our key performance indicator, you know, that it's a metric that's used to measure progress toward achieving a specific goal. So the nice thing about KPIs is that they can really help you with long-term goals, right? They help you focus your work and basically measure your progress. So maybe if nothing else, you know, if you haven't delved into any of the analytics with your courses, maybe you can kind of start, you know, get some benchmarking information and then be able to move forward from here and really begin to track your progress. And that might help you with some of this. A couple of questions to ask yourself as you get started trying to figure out what your key performance indicators might be. That those are going to be different for each of you, right? Because you all teach different courses, different subjects. You know, it's just so many variables there. So I thought these were some good questions to start with and to go ahead and ask yourself, what are your goals for this particular class? Are there any areas of major improvement that you want to see? And big priorities, big changes, they're very basic questions, I know that, but it's really helpful when you can start looking at some of these things, because it can help focus your work. Because a lot of times I'll hear from folks who just say, I want to see all the data for my class. And I can understand wanting to see everything that's available to you, but it also makes it really hard for you to set goals when you just have this big pile of data. So to go along with that, I've got a couple of factors that can influence your goals, right? So, first one being how many semesters you've taught a particular course. If it's your first semester teaching a course, that might be your benchmarking semester anyway, because you don't really have a lot of experience to know, what works and what doesn't work, what those areas of improvement might be, what some challenges might be. So that's very different than if you taught a course for several semesters. You probably have a better idea of, what the students struggle with or what you struggle with teaching them. The student audience is another huge influence for your goals, right? You're going to have totally different goals for upper division students than you would for lower division students, as well as majors and non-majors. You may be coming into this with some program level goals. Maybe you guys as a teaching team have determined some goals, for your department or for, your graduate program or whatever that may be. So you guys might have your own goals and objectives that you want to work toward, and you want to figure out how you can kind of break that down at a course level. And I know like our engineers have accreditation requirements, so that might influence their goals. And if anybody else is working toward accreditation, that would be another important factor when you're trying to figure out which metrics you want to take a look at. So when I got to thinking about this, I thought, I think it might be helpful if I tried kind of matching these metrics to some of the goals that you have in your class, some of these different areas that we commonly talk about in pedagogy, right? You'll see some overlap in some of these areas. But this is basically what we have metrics about, that, we're going to look at some of the analytics from all these different areas. So participation, of course, I gave a couple of examples here. It's just being course access. That's a very basic way to tell if a student is actually, participating in anything in your class. So another one I put with that was the, presence in synchronous sessions. I know sometimes we try to give people participation grades, and that's might be a good way to check for that. Engagement. So, we can look at a student's time in your class. We can also look on, there's a function to mark reviewed on items, and that's something Dara's going to talk about here in a few minutes. When we talk about performance, of course, we're talking about assignments and tests, and we can look at some data for those as well. And this final area on here, the verifying student claims. Now, this is not really something you're going to have any goals surrounding, but it is really good to have in your skill set to know kind of where to look to verify student claims. I'm sure that all of you have students every semester who tell you, oh, well, I submitted it. It should be there. So hopefully after today's session, you'll have a few ideas of how you can kind of verify some of those student claims. And if you look in some of these places and you still can't determine whether or not a student actually did what they said they were going to do, that's when you can contact eLearning and they'll start a deeper investigation for you. But this kind of gives you, empowers you a little bit to take that first step, do that first kind of first line of defense when you're trying to look at some of those claims. Okay, so now I just want to give you a few quick tips here. So as you begin to identify your KPIs for your courses, less is definitely more. So rather than choosing dozens of metrics to measure and report on, you should focus on just a few key areas. So part of the reason is just to avoid looking at data just because it exists, right? That's a really easy way for you to get overwhelmed and then you kind of lose your focus. So a good starting number, depending on what your goal is maybe you're looking at 2 to 4 different KPIs per goal, right? That's a reasonable place to start. then you're not combing through too much data and getting distracted and off track. All right, and then here's a few considerations. I know we have lots of folks who do different things in their class, have some strategies to deter cheating, but along with when we're deterring cheating, kind of one of the caveats there is that it can also limit our analytics. So for instance, if you're using pools to pull test questions from, that's a great idea. It's great to do when you're trying to deter cheating, but it very much limits the data that we get, because not all of your students are getting the same questions. So it limits that performance data. At the same time, you may have the same questions that go to everybody, but you've randomized the test. And for whatever reason, within Blackboard, when you randomize the test, it also cannot track metrics the same way as if the students are delivered the questions in the same order. I'm not sure why. But anyway, that's another downside. So those are both great strategies to deter cheating, but they don't work so well when we're looking at the metrics. Another thing, and this is kind of like, maybe I just worded this really awkwardly here, but it's difficult to measure student consumption of your instructional materials. I get a lot of folks who will say, but how do I know if the student watched the video? How do I know if they read everything I put in that learning module? And to me, I kind of equate that to like, how do you know the student in your face-to-face class paid attention to what you were doing? You don't really know. And that's why we have assessments, and that's something Dara can kind of do a deeper dive into that in just a minute. But you know, if you find yourself asking that question a lot, maybe it's time for some low stakes assessments and things like that. So again, we definitely have some challenges, but hopefully today we'll talk you through a couple of different strategies to help you when you're pulling this information. The last one here, though, is that the data is not foolproof. There's so many things that can factor in. So what we're doing here is we're collecting data, but that's far from the whole story. Very that students might launch something in your Blackboard course and then walk away from their computer, or the browser times out, or a number of different things. So that definitely things that don't paint an accurate picture all the time. So it's kind of just, you have to take the data with a grain of salt. So I think that's just, oh yes, last thing I wanted to mention here was about third-party cookies, right? So, one of the tools that we use a lot in Blackboard is Kaltura. We found in recent years, actually, I was working with Dr. Steve King, who's here with us today, and he was interested in getting some of the video analytics a few years ago, and he was saying that, it looks like none of the students are viewing my videos. And we went and looked and did a little bit of digging and basically reached out to our vendors at Kaltura, and they told us that they use third-party cookies to track their analytics. And right now, a lot of browsers are kind of at war with third-party cookies. And so they're blocking those, and that means that the information is not accurate at all. We have no way of really getting good numbers. So if you are using any third-party tools like Kaltura and you're trying to look at the metrics, it's not even worth looking at because they're not accurate. And so I wanted to bring that up here in case you are also using like publisher tools, or you're looking to add a publisher tool. This would be a great question to ask your publisher rep. Ask them how they are tracking analytics. So most of the things we're going to talk about here today are just within Blackboard. I'm also going to touch on Gradescope briefly, but I just wanted to give you this takeaway so that if you are talking to other publisher reps, or you're thinking about adopting other education technology for your courses, that this would be a really good question to ask about. So anyway, now I'm done. I will turn this over to Dara.
All right, thank you, Jana. Okay, so when we first talked about how we were going to present this information to you guys, we kind of broke it down in the sense of you're going to create a content item in your course. And then after you've created your content item, most likely you're going to do some type of assessment. And then after your assessment, you may want to look at reporting information on the assessment in addition to how students consumed your content. So that's kind of how we've broken our presentation down for you today. So we're going to start with creating content. So if we're going to create content with the concept of wanting to know how students are consuming our content, there's some tools within Blackboard that can help you with this process. And the 4 areas I'm going to touch on today is statistics tracking, the adaptive release function, the marked reviewed function, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about formative assessment. And that kind of goes back into what Jana was talking about whenever we're trying to really figure out, are students watching our videos, really reading that content that we're putting into the course. So we're going to start with statistics tracking. And essentially what this does is if you turn statistics tracking on an item, it is going to allow you to generate a report that will tell you not how long, but if students have accessed that area. So I've included a picture here. We do intend to share the slide deck with you after the presentation. So there's a little bit extra information in the slide deck that will hopefully help you be able to go back and find these pieces after our presentation. So essentially the drop-down chevron next to your content area item is where you can enable statistics tracking. And I've included those instructions here for you. And basically, you have to turn on the statistics tracking option before you're going to see the option in the drop down that says View Statistics Report. So you have to do one before you will see the other. There won't be a report there if you haven't turned on statistics tracking. So, and here is an example of a report. And I realize on your screen that this is probably small. So essentially what we have across here is bar graph at the top with a date breakdown. And whenever you go into the tool, it will give you the option to pick a date range. So let's say, for example, it is module 2 you're working on and you've uploaded a PDF into there that is really, important to the objective of that particular module. Well, you can actually pull a report if you've turned on statistics tracking to look at that one content item for a 7-day period. And essentially, the very first one is myself, and I've accessed 2 different times on 2 different days. So this is a way to just get a little bit more information. Of course, again, the caveat here is we can't tell you how long someone engaged with a document. Did they open it and close it? There's that option. Or did they open it and actually read through it and go back to it a couple of times as a source of reference? So this is a piece of the puzzle. The next item we wanted to share with you guys is adaptive release. This is also an option on a content item when you use the chevron in the drop-down menu. You have 2 choices, adaptive release and then adaptive release advanced. I wanted to explain the difference between the 2, but your takeaway here is if you want to use one of them, I would recommend going to the advanced, and here's why. Adaptive release, the basic, we're going to call that first one in the column there, is it allows you to create a rule for one item. And the next slide will explain what a rule is. Adaptive release advanced allows you to put multiple criteria against an item to allow it to be released for the students to see. So when we talk about that, what we really mean is this is a way for you to control what group of students can see a particular content item. You can use this for documents, for videos, for quizzes, for discussion boards. It can be used for pretty much any of the tools inside of Blackboard. So kind of the way that works is, like I said, the adaptive release advanced can be released by 3 criteria items, So one of those can be dates. I don't want students to see this until Sunday at midnight because we're starting a new module next week. By grade. So a student needs to make such and such score. They have to score at least 80% on this content item, this quiz, before I want them to go on to the next area. Or the membership function allows you to create groups. So if you have students that one particular group of students that you want to see this particular document at a certain point in time, you have that capability. You do not have to use all three. You can use one, you can use two, you can use three. Essentially, this gives you control of how your students, in what order your students consume that content. A really neat function that a lot of people don't know about, I think, is in the same drop-down menu in a content area item, you will see an option called user progress. And essentially, if you want a really quick way to be able to determine which students can see what, whenever you pull up that menu and you hit user progress, it will actually show you either a circle with a hash mark through it, or it looks like, I kind of think it looks like an eyeball with, it's green. So if it's green, that means those students can see the content. And of course, if it's got the hash mark through it, that would tell you that your students can't see that content area item. So I think that's a really quick, handy tool that you can use so you can quickly gauge if a student says, I can't see this. Well, you can quickly go in there and look and determine if they can or can't. Marked reviewed is also another way of limiting what students can see until you're ready for them to see it. But this is also something that you have to set on a content area item. You can actually use the adaptive release and the marked reviewed if you want to. And it basically gives you the functionality to release pieces as you want students to see them. So in my next slide here, this is how you know that a marked reviewed has been added to a content item. So again, that same chevron, the drop down that comes up next to your content area hyperlink, in this case, like homework 3, you do that drop down and it will say enable marked review. And a second window comes up that asks you if you want to enable or disable. And you would have to do the enabled part. And again, you will see this indicated underneath any content area item that you have added the marked reviewed tool to. And this is what a student sees as well. It's the same view. And the kind of last area I wanted to talk about is, again, how can I make sure that my students are actually reviewing this content that I've spent painstaking hours coming up with, putting together, those resources you go out and find, or the video content you're doing. And essentially, we do not always have control over how our students are going to consume our content. And sometimes that's in an incognito window. Sometimes it's on a smart device. And unfortunately, like Jana was explaining, the way that the statistical tracking in the background of these items works, we can't always say definitively, yeah, they did go in there and actually watch my video, or they did actually go through that PowerPoint presentation I put in there for them, or whatever the content may be. So some of the ways, much like you would do in a face-to-face class, to make sure that students are actually retaining the information that you're sharing with them, is trying to use some of those low stakes assessments to help determine if they are in fact consuming your content. And some examples of that are, you could do quizzes that are complete incomplete, not something that you have to go grade, because unfortunately we all know exactly how time consuming grading can be. So this is more knowledge checks, I think, is probably that would be a publisher tool term, I think. Having students post a journal entry that is maybe a complete incomplete or a pass fail type situation. using discussion boards, using the wikis, and even having 1 or 2 question quizzes that, you can set those to be automatically graded. At least then you can go through and gauge how much of the content or how much of the video a student is actually consuming. And I know that sometimes we would like to have a better answer. And I hope as we continue to move forward, this will continue to get better. But today, the best thing you can do for all the hard work you put into creating your content is potentially doing some of these low stakes assignments. One other area I was going to discuss before I pass this on is making sure that in Collaborate, you can pull metrics there as well. So this is one more area to, are they watching, are they logging in, and are they staying through the end of your session or through the end of your recording? And essentially, it will pull a report for you. And go one more screen. So here's an example of kind of what that looks like. And again, if a student is logging in an incognito browser or something along those lines, you may not see them. So again, it's a piece of the puzzle. But this is just kind of an example of what you could expect to see inside of that Collaborate metrics. What time they joined, what time they left, what was the total time they were in the session. And you'll notice on the far right that it has joins, and there's all ones in this particular example. In the early days of the pandemic, you would see these reports, and they may have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times that somebody has joined. Well, why would they do that? Well, it's potentially because they didn't have a strong enough signal and they were getting dropped, so they were having to come back in. So just a little tidbit there about that part. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Jana now.
Thanks, Dara. All right, so now I'm just going to talk to you for a few minutes about assignments. So we'll talk about mostly assignments in Blackboard, but then a little bit on Gradescope as well. So first, and this gets back at our verifying student claims. That's what this piece is. So not really a metric that you would kind of set a goal around or anything like that, but this is submission receipts, and this is really good information for you. And so anytime a student tells you that they submitted something and you don't see it, the very first thing I would do is go over here and look for the submission receipt. So this screenshot is from the Grade Center, and so you'll just go over to this last drop down here where it says reports, and then you'll find the last item there says submission receipts. And so on this next page, in this example, I searched for my own username on this particular course. So you see up at the top, so this would be where you put in your student's username, and then it's going to show you everything that that person has submitted within your class. And it's pretty nice. It's a nice log of everything because it shows you exactly what date it was submitted, what it was that they actually submitted, the document name, and the size of it, and then you also get this confirmation number over here. So this number can be really important if it ends up that the document mysteriously gets lost in Blackboard, and that really doesn't happen very often, because usually when things are submitted, you get a confirmation number because it is confirmation. But anyway, this would be the great first place to look, and if you do not see their assessment listed here, it's a safe bet that maybe they did not, the submission clearly did not go through if you do not have the confirmation number here. So the next thing to check might be their access to the course, and we'll get at some of those reports here in a little bit. But that way, you can verify, did they actually try to submit the work? So that type of thing. Again, it's just part of the story, but it's good to do a little bit of that investigating work yourself. So this is what the student submission receipts look like. This is the student view of the Grade Center. So this is their My Grades, and they have this fourth tab over here at the top on their view of the Grade Center. And then to actually see those submission receipts, they need to go right down here to the bottom, and it'll have a number that shows their submission receipts, and you tell them just to click on that number. And then you can see this is the student view of the submission receipts. You can see it looks pretty similar to what the faculty saw. It doesn't have like the, I think the other one had like the date stamp on it, or not, I mean the time stamp. Oh, this does too. Anyway, very similar. So that way the record should be on both people's side. Faculty should be able to see it as well as the student. So that's that part of it. Now this, I wanted to talk about the column statistics here for just a minute. So we're talking about assignments. So this one is not verifying student claims. So this piece of it, I've had lots of people who have talked to me about, you know, either after a big, maybe a big class project, or maybe after a big exam, things like that. You want to share like that cumulative data with the whole class. Like how did you guys as a class do on this particular assessment? And so it's great to be able to share that information with the class and be able to talk through it. So in order to do that, you're going to go in the Grade Center to the particular column in question, and you're going to do the little drop down chevron next to it, and then you'll see the option for column statistics. And so once you click on that, this is what you'll get. This page, and you can see this is not a very good column that I used in this example because it didn't have very many submissions, but you get a bunch of different stats on that particular assessment in your Grade Center. And Dara actually told me over in College of Ed, one of the things that they've done is that if they're team teaching something, maybe they want to look at you know, how folks are you being consistent with your grading across faculty and the team teaching, especially if you're using the smart views in the Grade Center. This can be a great help for that. So anyway, just good information to be able to pull up if you need to. So, all right, I'm going to shift gears for just a second and talk to you about Gradescope and some of the statistics that are there. If you've built out assignments in Gradescope, I'm sure you've seen the option over on the side for statistics. But what I also wanted to call your attention to, I don't know of anyone that's actually doing this, and I think it's kind of a cool option. If you have your learning objectives for your course, I know, like, don't get me started on the course mapping, right? I always talk about how much I love course mapping, but Gradescope can really do some cool stuff to help you with that. So, I mean, they can even do it pretty granularly, like down to the question within your assignments. So for this example one, there was 3 questions that were part of this particular assignment. And you can see that for the first question, I put that question covers objective 1 and objective 4. The second one covers objective 2. The third one covers objective 1. And so with this particular view on it, this is from that statistics link in Gradescope, I can very easily see how well my students have mastered each of those learning objectives. So, you know, based on the answers they give for that assignment. So it's pretty cool. This is another view of the same information, and just within, I'm sorry, it's not part of the screenshot, but up at the top you can change your view of it, and you can see this one is broken down by the tag. So I added the tag for those learning objectives. So you can see here that, you know, these particular students are struggling a little bit with objective 2, but they seem to have had a better understanding of objective 1 and objective 4. So it's just kind of nice to be able to break it down to help you better identify where students might be struggling in your classes. And of course, I just named these objective 1, objective 2, objective 4, just for the sake of this example. But you can name these tags anything that makes sense for you. All right. And finally, in Gradescope, you can do the exact same thing with the test too. So you can do the content mapping like that with, you know, like the objectives mapping with the assignments as well as with your tests, which is really nice. I know some of you have used Remark in the past, and Remark has more robust data than what you can get in Gradescope, but you can still get some good stuff in Gradescope. So I definitely wanted to make you aware of that. Now, this is the issue anytime you're wanting to do that objective mapping and everything, is it takes some work on the front end. So with this is just some data from a fake bubble sheet exam that I put in here. But what I had to do in order to get it to break things down for me, and of course I didn't, so Gradescope does the exact same view with the statistics, with the tests as well as the assignments. So I didn't repeat that view for you, but I had to go in after the test and put which objective each question went with. So there is some more work up front, but if you are reusing the same exam or the same assignment semester after semester, Gradescope really makes it very easy for you to copy those assignments and those tests from each semester. So after a couple of semesters, you'd have some really good data if you took that time to map out those objectives. So I really like that Gradescope gives us that option to do that. So like I said, Remark is a little bit more robust, but I don't think that's an option for us anymore, given the bubble sheet dilemma on campus, I guess. And if you used Remark, I'm sure you're aware of what I'm talking about. But at any rate, now that I've spoken about tests briefly, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Annie, and she's going to tell you some more about tests and data.
Thank you, Jana. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with tests in Blackboard. So the 4 items we're going to be talking about regarding test is item analysis, attempt statistics, test information, and access logs. These can all be found in the Grade Center. To get started, we're going to go ahead and talk about the item analysis. And for the item analysis, it provides statistics on the overall performance, how your test is perceived from the students. And so kind of going back to like some of the questions that Jana was asking earlier, as well as Dara, is first, what is the importance of your test? What is the importance of your class? As Jana was talking about, your goals of your class. So on the screen, I'm not going to read word for word, as Dara said. We are going to send you a copy of this slideshow. But I really wanted to talk about this on the student perspective. I think that item analysis, basically to give a whole performance review, a high level overview to your class. From the student's perspective, it allows them to understand what they missed, and maybe they don't feel alone because there's other students in the course that also missed that information. And it's good for them to get feedback because they know, I don't know that information. In order for me to go on into the next class and be successful, I have to know that information. So it's important for me to go back. So it's not that you have to give a very detailed log or overview for your test, but I think it's important for everyone to know that you do have access to this, and item analysis gives you this information to provide to your students in order to succeed. So where do you find this? In the Grade Center. You can go to the Grade Center and click on the drop-down arrow next to the column of the actual item, so of the test or of the quiz, and then you would click the item analysis. And we'll go into that later on whenever we do like a demonstration in Blackboard. So kind of how I put it is the things I'm going to talk about. Item analysis is kind of the big picture. The big picture being the test. How did the students do on the test? And then the next item we're going to talk about is the statistics of the test. So where in the test did students go wrong? Did they read the question and maybe they were really close to getting that answer correct, but they misread the question because they didn't read it closely? So this page in the attempt statistics in the Grade Center, it shows you, I kind of expanded it on the right-hand side because I realized it's going to be pretty small, and it may be a little bit smaller on y'all's screens as well. You can see here that only 50% of the class, or 50% of the class picked support tab when only 25% of the class picked the right answer. So then that can tell you, this information tells you as an instructor, maybe I need to go back and I need to review this content and let the students know this is what you should have answered, and this is what you should have gotten this lecture from reading the text, whichever it may be, and maybe clearly explaining that to them. So this being like per question, again, you can find this in the Grade Center. This is more of like a how-to for whenever y'all get the copy of the slides. And then the next part we're going to go into is the test information. So this would be looking at more of a student's attempt. Here you can submit a student's attempt if they were unable to submit their test. Here you were able to clear a test attempt. And then let's say a student were to contact you and they were to say, I accessed the course, or I was taking my test and I got kicked out, but you don't know where to begin. So this is a good indicator of, you find the student, you find the test or the quiz that they were stating that they were completing or they were in progress, whichever it may be. You come here and you go to the Grade Center and you look at their actual attempt. And when you click on the attempt, it pulls up another page and you can expand the test information. This is where you can find where they started, what time they started the exam, what time they submitted the exam. If they didn't submit the exam, it would say in progress, and you would have the option, like I said earlier, to submit the exam for them. If the student, like I said earlier, is claiming that they had a connectivity issue and you wanted to see maybe if there was a gap or maybe there was some other instance. The next part that dives even deeper into, I guess you would call it like a data puzzle. Dara referred to as a puzzle earlier, so I'm going to refer to as a Blackboard data puzzle. The next piece would be the access log. And the access log provides a very detailed list of how the student interacted with the test. And it tells you how much time they spent on each question. However, you must note that the cell in the Grade Center, it must have either a needs grading icon or an actual grade in order for the access log to be generated, which makes sense because the student would have to submit their test in order for the access log to be generated, so that way you could see each question and the details. If a student contacts you and says, I wasn't able to submit my test, you would have to go into the test information first, submit their test, and then the access log would be generated. All of this being said, if a connection is a factor, you may see an unusual gap in between each question. However, we are not able to tell if that is an actual internet connection. Like, just because there's a gap, it does not mean that we're able to tell from Blackboard that, oh yes, this was a definite internet connection, or no, this student was just taking their time on this question. Unfortunately, we can't tell that, but it could be an indicator if the student was stating they were having an internet connection issue and they got kicked out of their exam. That concludes my part about tests. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Dara for the early alert criteria.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So there is an area inside of Blackboard underneath your course management tool window, panel is a better word, I'm sorry, and it's called evaluation. And this is an area of Blackboard that I'm not sure many people realize is available to you. And there's actually 3 areas in there that we're going to talk to you about today. The first one is Performance Dashboard. And essentially, the Performance Dashboard is a place that you can go and click, and it will show you the last time that the student accessed the course. And it also tells you a little bit more information, and it's tied directly into the Retention Center, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in a minute. We're actually going to demo these sections for you, so you can actually see a little bit more of this. So this is pretty high level, and then we'll drill down a little bit more. The other information, the majority of the information you can also see in Grade Center, but it gives you a more comprehensive view in the Performance Dashboard. Amy, did you want to talk about the Retention Center real quick?
Yes, ma'am. So for the Retention Center, it is automatically visible in your Blackboard menu. It is under the control panel and under the early alert criteria, and you'll find Retention Center. We'll show y'all in just a little bit. But the three main functions that we wanted to talk about for the Retention Center, it shows you the students at risk. You can monitor students or items in the course, and then you can set up like your course activity to monitor your course activity.
Go ahead, Jana, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to briefly hit on the course reports for you really quick. So this, remember, we were just talking about the evaluation section. So I just did a screenshot here so you can see what we're talking about. So Annie and Dara were just talking about the Performance Dashboard and the Retention Center. You can see those listed there. And then we also have course reports. So the course reports are just kind of some canned reports that are already available in here. And basically you can just select any of these reports and use the little chevron next to it there and run the report. And so that's one way to create the reports. And then you can also do some more custom reports by going to the Grade Center and then using that drop down over here where it says reports and then create report. So you can do it much more customized that way. That's a great way also if you have a student who's planning to come visit with you in your office and they are concerned about their performance in your class. You can go in here and run a report for one specific student that shows how they've done, how they've performed on all your assessments. And then that can be like, you can print that out and give it to them as a nice hard copy. Like, all right, here's your progress in the class right now. You can see your areas where you need to make improvements, those types of things. So it really is helpful. So anyway, at this point in time, we're going to switch gears. And I believe Dara's going to show us some of these things in real time so that you can see what that looks like. And then, of course, we'll open it up for questions. So back to you, Dara.
All right. Give me 1 second. My computer has decided that now is the time to. Okay. All right, let's see if it'll let me share now. Okay. Amy, if you don't mind, go ahead and see if it'll let you share your screen. I can change my settings, but it's going to kill my session.
Okay, let me go ahead and try. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, if you'll go down to the evaluation, and let's start with that performance dashboard. And this is a course that Jana had created, and we had our student staff and the three of us all go in and submit answers to assignments and to some quizzes. So you can see there is some activity in here. So what you will notice is all of the students are listed and their role is listed. And I find, especially if you're team teaching classes, sometimes it's a quick place that you can just run through and make sure that all the people that need to have a certain role have the correct role. You can see the days since they last accessed the course. And then you've got some other information across here. And this is actually tied into the retention center. So we are going to scroll down and let's go ahead and open that retention center. Okay. And I'm going to guess that the majority of you all have not opened the retention center for. May have stumbled upon it on accident, but it's kind of a hidden area. So what you will see about the retention center is you've got your list of students, and you'll notice each of them, you've got columns: missed deadlines, grades alerts, activity alerts, and then access alerts. And you can go in and customize this. So what you will notice out to the right, we've got students you are monitoring. You'll notice it says Annie Fuchs, and then there's a star out to the side. And we have actually, she has starred herself in this, where you could actually star your student athletes or somebody that you received a notice about that you want to easily be able to track their progress in your class. And you can see that Annie has missed deadlines. So she and I decided we were going to be the bad students in the class. So there was some extra information. But so it gives you kind of a high level overview that you can customize. Annie, is there anything you'd like to add?
Let me just double check. I don't have anything to add. Sorry, I got thrown off. 1 second.
You're good.
I was just going to add that you also have the option in the retention center to, the ones that are showing right now are kind of like the canned things that Blackboard comes with, but you can create some custom alerts basically, or they're not really alerts, but you know, it'll identify students based on custom criteria.
Okay, I was just making sure that was the right button to click. Okay, so that's the only other thing I was going to talk about. So in the right-hand corner, top right-hand corner, there's this option to customize the retention center. So if you click on it, it will tell you what all you want to include in the risk table. And so the risk table is like what we were looking at on the previous screen, where you have the missed deadlines, all of these. You can change the name, and it has all of these different options. You can set different criteria. Like I said, include, not include, change the name. And that should be it for all of the, oh, you can create create rules, which are these. And yeah. So within the retention center, you can make it your own course. It's not predetermined by these. You can go in there and you can customize it by your stuff, set your own criteria. and make it yours for your students and how you want to manage your course. And that's all I have to add for the Retention Center. Jana, did you want to add anything, or did we cover it all?
No, I think that covers it. I think it's good. I think this is one of those areas that is not used very often, but if you did set this to follow some of your own criteria that you would use when you're submitting names for early alert, this could make it really quick and easy for you to just jump in here, and you can see the list of at-risk students in your class and just send those on over to freshman college. So hopefully using something like this would help you make more efficient use of your time. It takes some setup time up front, but then after that, I think it'll be good to go.
All right, I think that covers everything we intended to cover today. With 4 minutes left for some questions, is there anything we can answer for anybody in attendance? Kristen.
Sorry, I was having trouble getting my mic to work. I do have a question. I think Annie had said that you can't access the log to the test until after the test has been submitted. And I was wondering, like, when you save each question, would the log already show up as each question is saved? Or
Yes.
Okay.
So, sorry, I probably should have added that in there. There was another part I should have added. So, let me back up. A submission has to be ran through, or a grade has to be given in order for the access log to be generated. So
Okay.
just because they clicked save answers on 1 through 5, and then let's say 6 through 10, they didn't, you would have to go back and basically submit the test, which it's only going to save the answers 1 through 5. And then there's going to be an activity log on the ones they click save answers.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
Thank you, Kristen. I should have added that in there, and I forgot to add that in there. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you.
We know that we gave y'all a lot of information today, so if there's anything that you saw that you would like more information on, do not hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy to walk through it again and help you with your specific situation.
Absolutely, and I will stop the recording now, but next week I'll send out a link to the recording as well as the slide deck. Sometimes it's helpful to go back and see some of those screenshots so you'll know where to click into your class.